everybody, welcome to Season 1, Episode 2 of Personality Hacker TV. My name is Joel Markowitz.
I'm Antonia Dodge.
We're excited you're joining us today. If you've ever heard our podcast, you hear us at the end of the podcast, or at least me say this at the end, sometimes Antonia says this. Usually it's me that says, you haven't had a microphone to talk with us. We've talked about all sorts of personal growth topics, models of human development, personality types, and we invite you to come over to our website and write in your comments or questions. Well, today you don't have to do that because you have the ability on this live TV show to talk live on the air directly with us. Talk about your topic, your question, we can unpack some stuff together, whatever that might be. There's a live call-in number in the description and in the comment field. You can call and be part of the live show. So I want to invite you to do that. When you call in, you're going to be put into a hold queue, and then Cheryl will come on the line. She'll pull you out of that hold queue. She'll ask for your name, your topic. Just go ahead and give that to her. She'll put you back on hold, and then we're going to unmute you, and you'll be live with us here on Personality Hacker TV. So I think it's pretty cool. So that's all I had for the setup, basically, as far as that show goes. I looked over at you, kicked it over, what else do you got to say, Tony? So we did episode 1 last week, and it was really, I think it was successful. It's our first time doing a live TV show on the internet. And there's a lot of moving parts. It's very different than the podcast. Podcast, you sit down with a microphone. It's not live. You can edit later. It's just audio, so you can do it with your hair all crazy. And
you don't have to wear pants.
Yeah, you could be in your underwear if you want, in the comfort of your own home at any time during the day or night. And we've recorded podcasts at 3 o'clock in the morning before, if they were due the next day. This being live show, we've got to get it all ready to go. As perceivers, we have to be on a schedule. We have to set it up. There's all these moving parts and technical things that have to happen. So
we have to wear pants.
We have to get dressed and actually show up camera ready.
Although the way that the camera is set up, I guess technically we could be not wearing pants.
Pantless.
Yeah, you would never know.
I noticed you didn't wear your Pittsburgh Steelers shirt this time.
Well,
because they lost miserably again. One more third week in a row this season. So you decided. But I do have my Pittsburgh mug.
Yeah.
And you have your Oregon mug.
I have my Oregon mug.
I feel like we're representing
our,
in some ways,
our homes.
That's become a really favorite mug of yours too. You've been attached to this. Ever since she got this mug about 8 months to a year ago, she carries it around the house with her. No one else gets to use it. She personally washes it.
I can't live in Oregon, but I can drink out of a cup that says Oregon on it. So yeah. I guess that's as close to home as I can get.
It's become a totem.
On a day-to-day basis. It is. It's my totem. It's my little baby introverted sensing 3-year-old's SI totem from my home. So even if I can't be there, I can drink out of something that says it.
I'm trying to get rid of all of those in my life. I've got, off camera in our studio, there's probably a 6x6 cubic space of boxes and files and videotapes and old CDs and stuff, all my totems from my life that I'm trying to go through and rid them out of my life.
Yeah, we were actually talking about this, that it's interesting to see. There are so many things about our upbringings that we're familiar, but the thing that was very different about our upbringing is that I moved around all the time. My parents were constantly moving. And so I never got attached to anything physical or any specific location, except for the West Coast is my home, because I was born in Victorville, California, Southern California, in the Mojave Desert, lived there until I was about 9 years old. And then actually, even in that stint, we moved to Camas, Washington for a small amount of time, and then moved back to Victorville. And then we moved up to Portland, and then we lived all over Oregon and Washington the rest of my upbringing. But we changed houses or apartments approximately once every 18 months to 2 years. So I think I heard someplace that if you move 3 times, or maybe it's as much as 7, somewhere between 3 and 7 times, if you move that many times, it approximates the experience of having a house fire. That's how much stuff you lose, because you get rid of so many things as you move. And so there were just very, very few items that I remember traveling with me throughout my life. So to me, stuff is just get rid of it. If it's no longer useful, you get rid of it. Whereas you grew up in 2 houses, right?
Yeah.
You had one house until your parents built their house.
So I was 11 and then they built a house.
And then you grew up in that, and your parents were still there when we met.
Yeah.
So you still had your room, not set up, but you were 30 something, and you still had items from your childhood in your family's house, the room that had been your room pretty much almost your entire life.
Yeah.
So your attachment to physical objects, your introverted sensing's attachment to physical objects is almost, it's weird to me.
It's bad.
it's alien. And so I'm like, I pick up things and I'm like, what is the, why do we need to have this? You'll even see them in our set. Like you can see cans and bottles from, I mean, I think they're behind you, Joel. You'll have to like
my
lean
Coke
slightly.
bottle collection.
Yeah, and that's like, there's like a couple of Coke bottles or Pepsi bottles, but over there where you can't see is like an entire shelf full of them. And I'm like, why would you keep bottles and cans?
Well, they're from all over the world. Every time I travel somewhere, I would buy a local Coke bottle with the current, like the local script on it, like the way it was presented in that country, and then I'd bring it back and put it on my shelf. It was like a way to, like a traveling gnome thematically. I don't know. Yeah,
they were souvenirs. I can appreciate that, and also they're like big and unwieldy, and now they're here.
Well, many of them exploded in the box they were being stored in,
which was very disappointing.
Because I had a bunch of cans too, and so it was like this syrupy, sticky, weird mess that I had to clean out and get rid of a ton of those.
Anyway. Yeah, sorry. So, I mean, I didn't mean to run on this but yeah, that is accurate. That did happen. Sorry. I was just thinking, because I'm looking at some of those things right now in the office, and it's like, we got to get through those things. And your introverted sensing is like, I have a plan.
I take pictures of a lot of stuff. Like it's an old toy. I'm like, I don't want to get rid of this. It's like sentimental. I'm like, well, I could take a digital picture and then get rid of it. That's what I've been doing lately. Yeah. It's been helping my process of purging things from my life.
Yeah, my introverted sensing shows up very differently. Mine is more about like, there's a lot of ways that mine shows up. All right, let's stop talking about us.
So
there are actually calls, so let's do that. Let's do what this show is ostensibly about, shall we? Let's not talk about us. Let's talk about whatever it is the caller wants to talk about.
What is it? It's Ryan Seacrest and Kelly in the mornings show style. So Josiah,
you're the Kelly, by the way.
We're gonna go over here we're gonna go to the callers. Wait, we're gonna take a call. Josiah, are you there?
I am here.
Hey, Josiah. How are you doing today? Where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Nashville, Tennessee.
Nashville, Tennessee. All right. And what's your question today? Or what did you want to talk about?
Yeah, I've identified as an ENFJ for probably 5 years now. And I've been primarily focusing on the Enneagram for the last couple years, and I identified as a 3 for quite a while, and then I moved to Nashville, started my own business with another 3, and I got very overwhelmed, and I felt like I couldn't keep up, and I eventually succumbed to identifying as 9, feeling like with my childhood that made a lot more sense. And recently I've been noticing just a lot more introverted tendencies. And I guess I was wondering, going back to the Myers-Briggs, if INFJ made more sense for me. And I don't know. Saw you guys pop up, and I was like, I perfect time to ask.
Absolutely. Thanks for calling in.
All right. So effectively what I'm hearing is that the type that you have identified with traditionally, you're starting to question because you've been around, first with your Enneagram type, you were around somebody else that was also supposed to be the same Enneagram type, but they they outdid your 3. So you started questioning like, maybe I'm not a 3, maybe 9 feels a lot more. Like it feels closer to it. But now that you're sort of exploring 9 and identifying with 9, now you're wondering if you're actually not an ENFJ, you're an INFJ. Did I get that right?
Correct.
Okay. So I think when one is looking for their best fit type, particularly in 2 different systems, there is good and bad things about using other examples of those same types to find where you're at. The good thing is that you should be identifying with people who are of a similar type because you're a similar type, right? There's going to be patterns that are similar. So it makes sense to use them as sort of a litmus test. But the other challenge is that it's almost like you have to see all the nodes in the system in order to be able to take one of those nodes and use whatever is the emergent of that system, just taking one of those nodes and saying, well, I have a different emergent to my system, so I must have completely different nodes. And that isn't always the case. So I'm just going to ask a couple questions and see if we can get to the bottom of a few of these things. The first one is, do you know when you believed you were a 3? Did you identify with any one of the 3 subtypes? Sexual 3, social 3, or self-preservation 3?
I have always had a really hard time narrowing that down. I think the sexual and self-pres are almost tied, and then the social is like third. So I always had a hard time kind of narrowing it down.
Okay. And now that you're identifying more with 9, is there a 9 subtype that you're identifying with the most, or you're still sort of in that same situation where you're not sure if you're a sexual 9 or a self-preservation 9?
Yeah, it's kind of in the same boat. Like, I feel a lot of anxiety around my safety and like money, but I've kind of mostly been attributing that to kind of the 9 in stress going to the low side of 6 sort of thing. And that also feels like I could attribute it to some self-pres tendencies, but, you know, I don't know where to attribute those feelings of anxiety necessarily.
Okay. The reason why I'm asking is if you're still, so I'm sorry, I guess I should just rewind the clock a little bit. Do you feel solid about 9? Like, you're feeling good about that one? That one's not a question anymore. Enneagram 9.
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah. Are you feeling really good about Enneagram 9? You're not having questions around whether or not you're a 3 or a 9. You've landed on 9. 9 feels really good to you.
Yes. I think I feel really good about 9, like in the context of my whole life, and reading more text on the Enneagram, it just completely me. And I felt like 3 was definitely like, I'm maybe more competitive or aggressive than a lot of the 9s that I know, but I think that's mostly attributed to really good family structure, and I don't know, the default, I feel really good about 9.
Okay. All right, cool. So I won't get into the 3 you were working with may not have been the best person to fit yourself off of if you're still questioning 3, because like I'm a sexual 3, and I've worked with a social 3 and a self-preservation 3. And the self-preservation 3 ran circles around me when it came to work. Self-preservation 3s are the ones who are the go-getter 3s. And so like as a sexual 3, I looked at her and I was like, maybe I'm not as 3 as I thought I was, but then it's a different flavor of it. But if you feel pretty good about 9, I guess the big question then is, are the things you're experiencing as an NFJ right now, are they actually that you're leading with the dominant function of introverted intuition, or what we call perspectives? Or is it simply that you're a 9 and 9s have a tendency to have a quieter energy than other Enneagram types? And so I think, I know an Enneagram 9 ENFJ. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He was actually on our podcast. His name is Denzel Mensa. He has his own YouTube channel. And have you heard that podcast with Denzel Mensa?
No, I'll have to go back and listen to that one.
Okay. So he's an Enneagram 9, he's an ENFJ, and his best fit Enneagram type is 9. So he actually, for an ENFJ, has way more chill energy than you would expect an ENFJ to have, because he's not an ENFJ 3 and an ENFJ 6 or 7 or some of the more common Enneagram Myers-Briggs type pairings for ENFJs. He's a 9, so he talks a little slower. He's very thoughtful. He doesn't have a jump in energy, like a really sort of aggressive energy. He has more sort of a lean back energy. He's very thoughtful, watches the room, and he also is very certain he leads with extroverted feeling. That is what he believes is his greatest gift. So I think, and do you mind if I ask how old you are? By the way, that's a piece of information I'm missing.
Yeah, sure. I'm 28.
Okay. All right. So you're also moving into a time period that you're getting further away from that compulsive social nature that young people have, and you're getting more into the
choosing your friends more carefully and other things, right?
Yeah.
Choosing life more carefully.
Yeah, the season of life where like things don't feel as compulsive. Now they feel more like choices, and you're getting closer to 30, and so what are the things how do you want your life to unfold, and maybe you should get on that. And those are the kinds of things that are coming up for you as somebody who's exactly, you're kind of feeling that seasoning coming, the later stage of life. So what ends up happening, of course, is as we age, we get more and more into our auxiliary function, particularly if we're into personal growth or development, and particularly if we're working on it. So I think some of the things that should be addressed is, number one, if you are an ENFJ and an Enneagram 9, you're going to look very different than most ENFJs, because I think the ENFJ 9 pairing is more rare. I don't think it's something that you can't find anywhere in nature. We have somebody who we did a podcast with who's an ENFJ 9. So obviously that type pairing exists. And it's going to look different than other ENFJs.
I mean, harmony looks like, that was another thing. I was like, harmony seems like it should be a 2 parallel. Like, I feel like I should be a 2 because harmony sounds like it's basically what 2s do. But I don't feel, that's never been my story.
Right. Yeah. I think we try to shoehorn these two systems into a perfect pairing with each other. And while that satisfies some of our, particularly those of us who have introverted thinking in our stack somewhere, we always want an elegant system that matches up perfectly. And I think that I have found a lot more wisdom and a lot more usefulness in both of these systems when I realize that they have a relationship to each other, but there's no rules here. Like any type can be paired with any Myers-Briggs type can be paired with any Enneagram type. And that actually helps explain so many different people who are like, well, I'm this Myers-Briggs type. Why don't I identify with other people who are this Myers-Briggs type? Versus some people are like, I am an absolute archetypical ENTP because of blah, 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 right? So I think separating them out and then seeing them as two separate nodes in the system of who you are is the way to gain the most insight into these two systems. And so I think one of the things that I would focus on for you is, number one, I would let go of the idea that extroverted feeling or harmony feels like a 2 trait, so I should be there. Like just let that rule die, right? Like just let that go. Just go, I'm pretty sure I'm a 9. I identify with all the 9 stuff. I'm rested into that. I feel good about that. Find your subtype, because I think that colors things quite a bit. I think identifying whether or not you're a sexual 9 or a self-preservation 9 is a big deal. It will give you a lot of nuance into sort of the energy you bring and the energies you're bringing as a 9, because each of the different subtypes brings a different amount of energy to each of the types, in my opinion. And the other thing is to try to figure out whether or not your dominant function, flow state dominant, the thing you want to be doing all the time function, is extroverted feeling or harmony or introverted intuition or perspectives, which is the thing that you believe is your ultimate gift to the world, versus the thing that you are exploring right now because of the season of your life. Like, you're going to be more thoughtful right now as an ENFJ, and you should be, right? Like, as you age, as you get older, you're going to be getting more and more into your introverted intuition. The more life makes recommendations to see long-term, long range, it's going to pull on that function of yours. You're going to feel more comfortable there. You're going to feel less youthful compulsions. And the youthful compulsions can sometimes feel like maybe that wasn't me. Maybe I'm a completely different person. When really, when we let go of youthful compulsions, it just simply means that we're finding different aspects of who we are. And the other thing I would recommend you do is try to figure out what your inferior or 3-year-old cognitive function grip is. Because if you can identify your inferior or that 3-year-old position, then that diagnoses what the dominant or the driver function is, because they're a polarity. So if you're really struggling to find that dominant or driver, then what's the other side of it? Where do you go for grips? And I think
Right.
the other thing is too, when you move away, I mean, I'm almost going to contradict myself because I keep calling you an ENFJ, but let's pretend you're an INFJ. One of the things that's happening too is that you are also moving out of the compulsion of being a social youth, right? So if that was always itchy on you, if that was always uncomfortable, if you always like kind of felt compelled to socialize, but now you're like, oh, thank God that season of my life is over and I can go like spend all night at home and I don't have to hang out with people if I don't want to. And thank God that I'm no longer in my like, university time period or whatever, when I like felt compelled all the time. If you're finding an extraordinary sense of relief that you're no longer compelled to be social all the time, then that might be that you were an INFJ the entire time and you just were dealing with those useful compulsions that are starting to sort of drop off. Does that all make sense?
100%. It's very well articulated.
Yeah. So the key to the whole operation for you right now might be if you're struggling to figure out what that dominant function is, that flow state function. What we tell our profilers in profiler training is start trying to diagnose the inferior or the 3-year-old function. What's their grip? Where do they go when they can't even anymore? Where do they go when they don't feel like they're being themselves? And if you can identify what that inferior or 3-year-old is, oftentimes you can figure out whether or not you're an introvert or an extrovert, because then you'll know the sequence of your stack.
That makes sense.
Thanks, Josiah, for calling in.
Well, first I want to make sure that was helpful.
Well, you said that makes sense.
He said it makes 100% sense, but then I want to check in. Was it helpful? Is that what you're calling in? Did I answer your question?
You did. I'm going to look at subtypes and try to, identify that inferior function. I'm excited for the homework. It's very helpful. You guys are great.
Cool. Thank you so much for calling in.
Thanks, Josiah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Talk soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay. If you want to call in, by the way, the phone number, the live call-in number is right in the description or in the comment field for the show. So feel free to call that number to speak live on the air with us. We're going to go back over to the phone lines, and we're going to go to Chris. Chris. Hi, Chris. Are you there?
Hey, yes, I'm here. How's it going?
Good. Where are you calling from, Chris?
I am calling from Greensboro, North Carolina.
Greensboro, North Carolina.
This is INTP, Chris.
Correct. So what do you want to talk about today, man?
INTP. So I actually want to change my original question, if that's okay, to something else.
Sure.
Well, I was listening to the previous caller, and I was like, I want to talk about that. I want to ask this instead.
Sure.
So, I want to know what you guys, like maybe opinions, maybe some tips, maybe some strengths and weaknesses of an INTP who wants to be a coach.
Okay. So an INTP like yourself, I guess you're asking for a friend, right? So if you wanted to do coaching, what would look like for an INTP? What are maybe some of the things they need to look out for? What are the ways maybe they could be a really good coach? What are the things they would be really good at? What are some of the places where they would struggle in the coaching experience for being an INTP? Do you have certain type of coaching in mind? Like, coaching is a broad category, right? There's like fitness and health coaches that help you get weight training. There's nutrition coaches. There's relationship coaches. What kind of coaching would you be interested in, Chris?
Yeah, so most likely it's going to be like a personal development type of coach.
Okay. And have you heard the little model that we keep referencing, visionary, calibrator, implementer, where we talk about there's kind of 3 styles of people when they come up to an enterprise or when they're helping somebody out. They help people cast a vision. They help people get something done. They implement, help them with steps to get something done. Or they point out the flaws and the calibration points that are maybe a little off. Like, well, if you tweak this over here, you get a better result. So it's leverage points and calibration. Which one of those coaches do you tend to think that you would identify with the most? Like, how do you think you show up when you're helping other people?
So for me, the first time I heard you guys talk about that model, I really gave it a lot of thought, and it's sort of a tie between a calibrator and I think the other one was integrator, like getting stuff done.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was an integrator, Okay. So
Implementation.
it's kind of a toss-up
implementer.
between one of those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So that's cool. So a lot of INTPs, a lot of TI, introverted thinking users, in my experience, when I see them in coaching or teaching or training or content creation, you go on YouTube and you look at these videos, like science videos or understanding things videos, a lot of them are introverted thinking users, like INTPs, ENTPs, ISTPs, ESTPs. And it seems like a lot of them are calibrators. Like calibration is like the realm of introverted thinking. It doesn't always mean that. There's a lot of visionary INTPs or implementer INTPs and things, but I see a lot of calibrators in the introverted thinking realm. And Antonia obviously is a calibrator, right? She's very heavy on the calibration with her introverted thinking. So I would say, so the one thing just in general, and this is gonna be a general statement for anybody that wants to be in coaching or teaching or content creation. The one thing I've noticed a lot of people struggle with is the idea of context, frameworks, and seeing the holistic picture of what they're doing when they're trying to be helpful. So often people, like, for example, calibrators, for example, somebody maybe like yourself, like an INTP calibrator, they have really good insight and they have really great stuff. And Antonia can speak to some of her experiences as an introverted thinking person, because I'm speaking from not having that as my experience. But I see them show up with a lot of great things to add, a lot of calibration to give. And sometimes they get so zoomed in on the content, the context can be the struggle. The way to set it up, the quote unquote bedside manner, if you will. Now that's a general statement. That doesn't mean that that's your case at all, Chris, or even obviously Antonia's case. I think she does a great job on camera and coaching, all that stuff with context. But that's the thing in general that I've seen a lot of introverted thinking users, primary, especially like INTPs, for example, I've seen them struggle with the context piece of how to frame things, how to just anywhere from the actual coaching session all the way to like the business side of it. Like how do you think about it in holistic terms? Because they're so excited and so good at getting right into the details of everything and calibrating on the detail level. That's where they shine. So I've seen a lot of introverted thinking people put themselves into other people's ecosystems or platforms and do really well, because then they get to quote unquote just show up to the microphone or the stage or the coaching session. You have to deal with all the bull crap of like framing and context and business and all this stuff. So again, that's a very, very general statement. Most people benefit from that kind of structure, but I would say introverted thinking users in particular, because they don't have that extroverted thinking TE in their stack to help them execute on the outside kind of framework stuff. But then again, that's very general, broad brush.
Yeah, the
Okay, yeah.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Just one comment real quick on
Sure.
what Joel said. I know you were making a general statement, but what you were saying is a lot how I am. I do lose track of context. I've struggled with that. I do pretty good at my job, to be honest. But I've been developing that over a number of, 10 years or more. But where I struggle is I don't want to put myself in someone else's like context and framework and go, I want to create my own and then go with it. And that's been my challenge.
Oh,
So
I
it's
get
kind
it.
of like I just like doing my own thing. I mean, that's what it comes down to. I want to do my own thing, but I don't want to sound too childish here. But yeah, that's kind of how it is.
Oh no, I've heard this from many people. Trust me.
The NTP struggle is real about the whole. A lot of us what's called power away from, which means that we don't want to have anybody over or under us. We just want to be like completely separated from hierarchies, and so we end up not playing well with others, and we just want to go do our own thing. And if we don't have like a solid roadmap, right, for how to make it happen, then we get lost. And I have observed that a lot of us are super good at a couple different things that we're just crazy good at, but we don't necessarily have everything else around it that we can plug our insane abilities, if we have those insane abilities, into. And I think going back to your original question of coaching, like Joel went to the business side because that's what Joel does, right? Joel always goes to the business side, and he's always like, all right, you got to figure out a framework for this. Of course, and I'm more in the concept of the actual coaching itself. So that's the thing about coaching, is that it's both a skill you develop in and of itself, and then there's the component of how do you make it happen? How do you hang your shingle? How do you get attention? How do you get clients? And so there's like actually a 2-part challenge here. And so when you say, hey, tell me about coaching as an INTP, I think both of those things can be challenging, but my observation has been that the NTPs grasp the skill development, the tactical elements of the actual coaching itself a little easier than they do the hanging the shingle out part, which is, I think, why Joel probably went to that direction. But speaking to the actual coaching itself, I think when you pare down and figure out who you want to be coaching, how you want to be coaching them, and get some of those details sort of hammered out, the content will inform the context, meaning the kind of coach you want to be oftentimes helps you create a structure or a plan for how you're going to hang your shingle out. So one of the things that we teach our students in profiler coaching. So profiler coaching, once a person goes through profiler training, there's this program called profiler coaching that only people who've gone through profiler training have access to. And that's using what you learn in profiler training, which is, how to profile somebody and do a little bit of coaching with them, how to sort of formalize it into a business structure. And in profiler coaching, we tell people.
When she says business structure, she means applied coaching. To an actual coaching session or with real people that want to be coached.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. Not just incidental.
Not going into businesses necessarily. It's
exactly.
That's what she meant.
Right. The business of it. And we tell people that as they're determining what kind of coach they want to be, because that's the first part, we of course have a few different models, but one of the things that is helpful is what we call the HAT model. And we've done podcasts on it. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but HAT stands for Healing, Achievement, and Transcendence, which are, in our opinion, sort of the 3 sort of broad categories of personal development in general. Healing is when you are helping people address their traumas. All right, so they have something that they're carrying with them that is limiting them, and they're sort of stuck in a cycle of trauma. And healing is getting them out of that. Achievement is when you're at a baseline of health, but you're trying to get to the next level, and you've got some obstructions in the way. Maybe they're outer world obstructions or inner world obstructions, but there's something that's sort of creating a glass ceiling for you. And the transcendence is anything that addresses the ego. So anything that has to do with, self-actualization and becoming sort of the metamorphosis of going from one version of yourself to the next version of yourself. And oftentimes ego work is related to that. So just knowing what style of personal development you want to do sometimes helps inform what kind of coach you want to be, or like how you end up hanging your shingle for coaching. So if you're a healing coach, you got to figure out what kind of healing you want to be, because there's multiple different kinds of traumas. There's physical traumas, there's psychological traumas, and there's emotional traumas. For some of that, being a coach is not the most appropriate thing to do, because you might actually need to be a full-on therapist. And therapists are like healing coaches. There's physical therapy for the body if the body has experienced trauma. And then, of course, there's actual psychotherapists for the mind's trauma, and then other forms of therapy for emotional trauma. So that's usually the realm of healing. And then achievement, there's like business coaching. So achievement, there's like a financial achievement. Then there's like, I have a friend who's an achievement coach that teaches people how to do public speaking. So she's a coach around expression and getting your, sort of all the physical elements of it, of like speaking clearly from the diaphragm, but also knowing what you want to say that's honest and true to you. So that would be a form of achievement coaching. So there's like different styles of achievement coaching. And then in transcendence, there's all sorts of different places you can go with transcendence coaching. Are you doing ego work? Are you doing like, you're going from maybe middle age work, right? A person is going from like one season of their life to the next season of their life, and there's all sorts of things in there too. And so when you know what kind of coach you want, like who's your target audience, what do you want to do coaching around, healing, achievement, or transcendence? Once you kind of figure that out, then you can go towards Joel's model of the visionary, integrator, or implementer, calibrator, which is, are you the kind of person that helps somebody build a plan? Do you have more of an implementer's mind? And so when somebody comes to you with, let's pretend it's achievement coaching, they're like, I have an idea that I want to capitalize on, but I'm not sure how to do that. And then your job is to help them build a plan and then work the plan. Or are you more of a calibrator? Somebody comes to you with a challenge. I'm not sure why, like my relationship with money is weird and I can't seem to get to the next level of my business. Well, then you help calibrate their thoughts around the relationship to money or something to that effect. So it's really kind of a matter of sort of using these models that have helped you to try to figure out what your leverage point is in helping others, which is why we recorded that whole thing called Your Mess is Your Message. Most of the time when somebody's trying to get into coaching and trying to figure out what it is that what kind of coach they want to be, the best map is to look backward. Where did you come from? And what were all the tools that you used in order to get to where you're at? And do you believe that you have the ability to save people years of struggle if they talk to you and you have some recommendations on how they can see things, some of the actions they might take that were leveraged for you? Can you help somebody save years of their life by, instead of having to like figure it out slowly and clumsily like you did, right? Like we all have to, by saying, here were the leverage points, here are the actions I took that were the best ones, here were the things that I did that weren't actually very helpful, and here were the perspectives I had to take in order to fully realize that. And so once you kind of chart out what kind of coach you want to be, what your skill set is, and the map that you use to get there, and then you formalize that, right? You turn that into the model or the formula, then it becomes a little bit easier to figure out how to apply all of that to a business plan. And then that's when you start thinking in terms of hanging out your shingle. Was that helpful?
Oh my gosh, like, yes, it's so helpful. I feel like I should pay you for that information. Like, seriously.
There'll be a link in the description.
That's really
somewhere.
Good for me.
Yeah. All right, good.
There'll be a PayPal link somewhere.
Yeah. No. That's the point of this, right?
We're just kidding.
Yeah.
Cool. So do you feel complete on that question today, Chris?
Yes, I do feel complete. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Cool, man.
Have enough to go on to begin the process.
Oh, yep.
All right. Awesome. Thanks, Chris. Appreciate you calling in again.
All right, thanks.
All right, thanks,
Bye.
man.
Peace.
All right, if you'd like to call and join us live on the air, the call-in number is in the description or in the comment field. It's a US-based number. You just call that on your phone. You'll be put into a hold queue. Charis will pick that up and say, hi, Charis here. What's your name? What's your topic? Then she'll put you back on hold, and then you'll just wait until we unmute you and you're live on the air with us. So we're going to go back to the phone lines. We have Dipali. Dipali is on the phone. Dipali, are you there?
Hi.
Hi.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Hi, Dipali. Where are you calling from?
I'm good. I'm calling from New Jersey.
New Jersey. Fantastic.
Yeah.
So what do you want to talk about today?
Yeah, so first of all, I wanted to say congratulations on this new channel, and this is amazing.
Cool.
Not only did I love listening to you guys, I love watching like the two most beautiful people I ever know. So this is awesome. Thank you.
Cheers. Thank you for the well wishes.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, so I had a question. This is kind of going off of the last, I don't know if it was the last one or the podcast before that. Antonia and Joel, both of you, spoke about food and how, health, how it kind of, we start incorporating that. And I've been on that journey lately. And I just thought it was, it kind of resonated with me a lot. So basically, my question is this something that kind of happens to everyone, like midlife? You kind of reach this point that, you want to improve, and then you find this health trend and go on that path. And then what I've been noticing with myself is I was going through healing, that was fine, and then I said I have to really start taking care of myself because I came to that place, thankfully. And I did. So I'm eating right, I'm exercising. Before that, you kind of have all your ducks in a row, and I guess that's when you land that healing point, and then that's taken care of. And now, even though I'm doing really well, there's this annoying voice that's, what's more? Like, what do I bring? What do I bring? So is this kind of normal? I'm an ENFP, by the way.
Okay.
When you say
So
what,
is like any never satisfied?
when you say what do I bring, what do you mean by that?
Well, a contribution in a way that's like large, because day to day, community, family, yourself. So now I incorporate myself into that community and family and every, yes, I'm taking good care of myself as well. everyone around me, and we're all kind of jiving together, everything's great, blah blah blah. But there's still that okay, there's got to be something else I should be doing, where people around me are like, you're just crazy and you're just like unappreciative, and I'm like, no, I appreciate everything. There's just something more. I don't know. I probably sound like a crazy person right now.
No.
Yeah.
So let me just kind of tell you what I'm hearing you say, Polly. I'm hearing you basically say, I had some stuff to get together in my life. Like I was living a very free-form life. I didn't have a lot of routine. I wasn't taking care of my health. And I put attention to that. And I've gotten my life more stabilized on a more routine basis with my health, with my life, my family, and everything. And it almost sounds, you didn't say this, but it almost sounds like in the subtext of what you said that it was like a feeling like once you got all that handled, your life purpose, or at least your life passion in the moment for the next maybe decade or half decade would emerge from that. Like getting all that settled would then, the Red Sea would part and you would see the clear path in front of you or whatever. And it would be like, oh, that's the way I've got to go. Or, whatever metaphor would be, maybe not the Red Sea parting, but basically it would be clarity for you based on putting some of those things together. And you're almost like, that clarity's not coming to me. Like I have a desire to do something bigger and more epic with my life than what I feel like I'm doing now. Not that what you're doing is not epic, but you just have this desire for something. And you were hoping that putting all this in place was going to lead you there. And it hasn't yet. And now you're like, well, where do I look? What do I tether to? How do I know what I should be going toward? Or am I being, even more important, am I being selfish or ungrateful for desiring something more than all the wonderful benefits that I have and all the routine that I've created?
Yeah, you totally nailed it. Yeah, both of those. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So is that kind of, and also again, I'm 47, so it's like midlife. I don't know if this is crisis. I wouldn't call it crisis because, it's socially and it's all in place, but like internally, there is that part of me, what you just mentioned.
Yeah.
What you just expressed. Yeah.
So the two things.
So that it's a tough. Sorry, go ahead.
No. I don't want to cut you off if you have more nuance to give. I've got two things coming up for me though. So I'll go ahead and say them.
Well, she say them and then she can chime in again.
All right. So the two things that are coming up for me is, yes, extroverted intuition's job is to never be sated. That's its job. Its job is to constantly be exploring and looking for new patterns and looking for novelty. That's its job. And those of us who have it, we have a tendency to struggle with a sense of restlessness when we're fully in our extroverted intuition. So that's part of being an ENP. Part of it is that we just always have to know what's next, what's coming up next. Oftentimes our work is when we're balancing that other side of the polarity of introverted sensing, or what we call memory. When we're balancing that part of ourselves, what we do is we look for a sense of rootedness. We're looking for a sense of a way to not have all of our exploration and all these new thoughts and concepts and the experiments we run and the travel we do and all this stuff, to not have it just be this big mess that gets lost upon our death, right? We have to have a sense of rootedness. We have a sense of framework. We have to have a through line of our life that we can rest into in order to be able to then organize all of that stuff that we've accumulated throughout our lives, all those experiences and all those patterns and all those connections. That through line of introverted sensing allows us to have like a foundation to put all that stuff into, so that we don't lose it. Because the challenge with extroverted intuition is that it's always looking for the next thing. And that means that it burns the work it has already been doing. So what I hear from you is that when you started addressing and attending to your life and to your body and to your health, what ended up happening is that you ended up having now a rhythm of a through line, right? Like now you've got some things handled, which are like things like health, which for us ENPs, oftentimes our physical health is represented in our improved relationship with our introverted sensing, because an improved relationship to health means routine. It means that we have to be eating in a certain way. We have to be like addressing the kinds of foods we're eating and when we're eating and when we're working out. And to do that all haphazard means that we don't ever get any traction. So introverted sensing allows us to create a sense of traction in our life. And once we get that stabilized, our extroverted intuition goes, okay, now what? Now what else can we plug into this system? So that's the first thing that comes to mind. And the second thing that comes to mind is that, yeah, that's very predictable, also according to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? So in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, what my observation has been for a lot of people is that when we're used to being stuck in what's called Maslow's basement, right? So the first layer of Maslow's needs, all humans have survival at the baseline. But once we get survival needs met, we go up to safety and security, which is a sense of like not having to survive every day, but now we like have kind of sort of a rooted safety and security. We're not just trying to get food for the day, but we're actually trying to like now make sure that we can like pay our bills for the month, because we know we're going to survive for that day. But the question is, what is our long-term survival? So we start locking that down. And once we get a sense of safety and security, then we move up to the need of love and belongingness. And then we start looking at relationships and who's in my life and can I improve those relationships and how can I get those good, and have my need of being loved and feeling a sense of belongingness in a community sated. But then as soon as that happens, then we bump up to self-esteem. Now, self-esteem is how do I do things like improve my situation? How do I become a better version of myself? How do I improve who I am? And how do I contribute, right? Self-esteem is oftentimes when we ask about contribution. And then at the top of the pyramid at this point is self-actualization, which is when we start to see ourselves transform and become new versions of ourselves. So what it sounds like to me is that you got your Maslow's basement needs met, right? You're out of survival, you're not in safety and security, and you're not in love and belongingness anymore. You've got those handled. And so now you're popping up into self-esteem. And when people are used to staying in Maslow's basement, and you'll kind of see people when they get to self-esteem almost not know what to do about it. And so they sabotage themselves and synthetically go back into the basement, right? They like go, it's almost like they'll pick fights with spouses, or they'll create financial problems, or they'll create all this drama. A lot of times what happens is I notice a lot of people create drama in love and belongingness. And then they'll just have like all these dramatic relationships and they're always fighting with somebody, or there's always drama going on. And that's them having peaked up into self-esteem and not knowing what to do about that. Like, okay, so now I'm supposed to get into personal development and improve myself, and now I'm supposed to be a contributor in a big way. That feels weird. And there's not a lot of maps there. There's not a lot of people there. So then they just kind of shove themselves back down. And what I hear from you is in the Myers-Briggs model, you got your introverted sensing rhythms down, you got your rootedness down, and now your extroverted intuition is all excited. And that happened simultaneously by going like sort of graduating to the next Maslow level of self-esteem. So now your extroverted intuition is like, okay, how do I contribute? How do I give back? What do I do now? And I think that that's very natural to get to that point. And I think that that's actually a really good place to be. It's a place that doesn't have a lot of clarity initially, and it's a place that doesn't have a lot of roadmaps, because everybody goes through self-esteem differently. Everybody finds their contribution differently. And so it's a place that creates a lot of question marks. And if you're a person who requires a sense of certainty to feel okay, that's oftentimes when you rush back to the basement. But if you can live in uncertainty for a while, if you can live in a place of experimentation, if you can live in a place where you're just sort of trying these things out, like going back to the question of, or the talk we did about your mess is your message. If you can start looking at things like, okay, so what was my journey? And what did I have to figure out and get through? And how do I feel like I can save other people hassle, pain, hours or years of their life? Like, what are the things that I can contribute? And I know I can because I've watched myself go through all of this process. How can I take what I've learned and now give back, because I'm in a really good position to do so, and not everybody is. That's kind of what I hear you, like it sounds like you're moving into that space. So get experimental, use your extroverted intuition to start asking what if questions, and use your introverted sensing through line to sort of create a timeline of where you've come from, and see if you can use that function to help inform where you're going next in a sense of contribution. And just get used to a little uncertainty, get used to being in a space of experimentation, because it's one of those things that you can't decide and then go act, when you're looking for life purpose, when you're looking for contribution, it's one of those things that emerges as you're active, as you're on your path, as you're doing different things. That's when life gives you moments of clarity to sort of calibrate and go, actually, this is the road I need to be going down. And you go down that road a little bit and you're like, oh, actually, I think this is the path off of that road that I should be going down. And then you find that path and you're like, okay, now actually it's this little trail. And then all of a sudden you're in a space where you're like, I have to go on the other side of that. And there may or may not be a trail. So I'm going to have to start creating this trail on my own. And that's when you find your life purpose. Does that make sense?
Wow. Yeah. That just like, I think the previous caller, Chris, I think it was, you should be getting paid for this, but thank you so much. That made a lot of sense. I mean, it's a lot of work. I realize it's not, snap on my finger. I mean, so far where I'm at right now, I'm extremely grateful and I'm very proud of myself for sticking to things. And it's not usually like me. Like I struggled all my life, even, in my 30s. And it was always, yes, I can do this. And then I'll just go all in. And then it's like, poof, it just goes away. Like, so this time, it's been almost like a year that I see consistency, and I'm proud of that. I'm thankful for that. And everyone else around me sees it. But they're like, like I mentioned, and everything you just said makes a lot of sense. It's a process, just like everything else is a process. And so going, seeing it from that angle, and I guess taking it in that way, everything you said makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much. And thank you for that advice.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And congratulations on the consistency. That is not easy to do, particularly as an NP.
It's not.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
absolutely.
You. Yeah, no, it's a great feeling. And to other NPs, ENPs, whoever, I truly, oh gosh, I know the pain. But it's totally worth it. It's definitely worth it. And I guess things will, like you said, I have to open, be okay. It's almost to the point that, sometimes I just want to like light a match and just like burn everything down and be like, okay, I just got it. Because I am also experimenting on myself, because that's who I have control over, right? I do experiment in health ways and different things. I'm not afraid, but to do it on a different level, where it makes a difference to other people, I can't just keep lecturing people and keep, because everything I do, I want to vomit it out to everyone I come across. And so there has to be more in order for me to find that. Yeah.
Resist the temptation.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Resist the temptation to burn everything down. I know that you know that, but that's, I think that people are surprised by how much more uncomfortable uncertainty is than pain. I think we're used to pain. We know how to deal with pain. Uncertainty is a completely different animal. And so people will do things to get out of uncertainty that will generate pain, just because the feeling of pain is more familiar than the feeling of uncertainty. So that's when self-sabotage comes in. So I think that that's actually that's the discipline of moving to the stage of your life. The discipline of getting to the self-esteem place is sitting with uncertainty, like letting it wash over you, being okay with its existence, recognizing that it doesn't have to mean anything. All it means is right now, there's not clarity, and that's okay, because clarity comes over time. And to associate certainty with the passage of time is hard with us sometimes, since introverted sensing, the part of us that understands the passage of time the most, is our inferior or 3-year-old function. It really pulls on us to use that function to understand a through line. But everything, like we all understand things in retrospect so much better than we understand them before we take action. So I think that's really the discipline of this time frame, is just making peace with uncertainty and moving forward anyway. And I think I think you've got this. I mean, I think you're in a pretty good situation to be able to contribute and be a contributor. I mean, I know you, and so I know your situation, and I know how far you've come, and I know, I mean, the amount that you've done and the amount of time you've done it in is actually quite impressive. But it still takes time, like you said. So that's the one thing, is just make peace with uncertainty and make peace with moving forward and having things, particularly as an ENFP. Jill talks about introverted feeling as being one of those things where sometimes you don't know the right decision until you've already made it. And then all of a sudden you're like, the parts of you that are like, no, not that. Then all of a sudden kick up.
Right.
There's going to be some of that, especially as an ENFP, as you move forward. There's going to be moments of like, oh, wait, that wasn't the thing I wanted to do at all. And then you'll feel obligated maybe because you said yes to something, and now you feel like you have to complete it. Now you're resentful. So maybe one thing you want to do as an ENFP is that anything you say yes to, make sure that it's not like a major commitment. Make sure you're not like locking yourself into something that's like a 2-year commitment. Make sure the things you say yes to have just short timelines to feel them out. And then if it's right, then start committing yourself to longer timelines. But that's the thing, is that you have to be in motion. You have to say yes to a lot of stuff. You have to feel what it's like to say yes to that thing, and then determine, was that the right thing? Maybe I should be heading in that direction, or like, yes, saying yes to that was the best decision I made. So those are the kinds of moments that are coming up for you, and you'll find yourself, your voice, and your contribution in all of that. But just keep experimenting and keep going forward.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you so much.
Yep,
very, very helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you
pleasure.
for
Love you
calling
guys.
in.
Thanks.
All right, bye.
Yep. Thank you. Bye-bye.
So I want to make a quick comment about ENFPs just for a moment.
Of course.
And then we have a written in comment. Today I want to experiment taking that. I don't think in the future we want to do a lot of written in stuff because we want people live on the air. But today I do want to take that, just to experiment with it. So it's our second episode of season 1.
Yeah.
So the previous caller just made me think she was an ENFP, and I had this thought about ENFPs that I wanted to share with you. If you're an ENFP, that might be helpful. I go online and I see a lot of ENFPs out there on YouTube, on our podcast channel, and man, us ENFPs, because I'm an ENFP also, our lives are a mess, guys. Like, what is going on? And I kind of get it, right? Because I'm with you. I understand. One of the things I think is really helpful, though, I think a lot of ENFPs go through the world and we try a lot of new stuff, and we approach life and all the new things we try almost like a radio that's trying to tune to different stations. And we're hoping the radio station we tune to, one of these radio stations we tune to, is going to strike us, almost like a godlike striking of the heavens parting, angels singing, and certain things are going to be enlightened to us. We'll be discovering something that was our true passion or purpose or mission or interest or whatever it is. And we keep turning the stations, and we turn the station, we listen for a while, metaphorically speaking, we don't hear what we think we should be hearing, so we turn the station again. And I see a lot of ENFPs doing this with the experiences that they pursue. I think it's important as an ENFP to continue to pursue experiences, to stretch, to grow. But instead of thinking in terms of like waiting for something to strike you as an ENFP, my recommendation would be, and this has been very helpful, and again, I'm overvaluing my experience. So if you're an ENFP with a different experience, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. But from my experience, instead of trying to find the station, quote unquote, that will strike me, or the thing that will be discovered and all of a sudden make it, like the singing angels, start thinking in terms of collecting almost like tools sitting on a table. Everything I do, every experience I have, it's a set of things on a table that I now get to decide about. So it's not about something striking me from out there, almost like God telling me what to do, or some entity. It's about bringing that experience in, sitting on the table, and still being the authority for my introverted feeling over the decisions I'm going to make from all those experiences. This has been very profound in shifting from discovering my purpose to deciding my purpose. It still takes experimentation, understanding, going out, trying new things, calibrating as you go. Maybe you don't have all the details out of the gate, but I think it's a way for you to capture those experiences and you still remain in the driver's seat of your life. You're still the authority that's going to decide what you'll do going forward. This is the work of you as an ENFP, though, by the way, because to decide that, have that own internal authority, means you have to work on your introverted feeling to be able to make those decisions for yourself. Because a lot of us ENFPs move through the world very unsure of ourselves. We don't know am I allowed to decide this? Am I allowed to go ahead and make this decision to choose this off the table of my life and make this a part of my experience? Or do I have to wait for some other authority or radio channel signal that strikes me and tells me that I have permission, and it like almost draws me forward toward that? Now, sometimes that can happen to people. The Joan of Arc experience, you get struck and you're like, this is what I was put on this earth and meant to do. I'm sure that happens to many people, and you listening that or watching, that might have been your experience too. But I would recommend that you go through life thinking in terms of you are the authority. You will be making the decision at the end of the day. And all your experiences give you more fidelity and a better decision for what you're going to do with your life. I think that's been, for me, and I'd love to hear your thoughts as an ENFP, if you're listening or watching, that's been the biggest shift in my life. Because now I've had to get really good. What does that internal authority look like? What is my introverted feeling? The thing that's driving my life, the should statements in my life, where do those come from? And I've had to work on that in order to make the decisions about what I want to do going forward. So I just want to make that comment.
So can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Okay. Ahead. So what is the reconciliation between experimenting the way that you need to as an ENFP in order to like find things that are right for you to pursue, and conscientiously deciding to go a certain direction? Like, are those two things, like if you're just experimenting and just waiting to feel what's right, is there a challenge in like you're just like, sometimes you just never know what's the right call, and so you just keep hopping around all over the place, and that's when you decide? Or like, what if you decide something and that's not right for you? Do you stick with it anyway? Or what's the reconciliation between those two concepts?
Well, I think it's kind of like, let's say you had two, I'll use a battle term because I don't have a better metaphor right now, but you have two hills to charge up and take over. Mm-hmm. The faster you go up hill A mm-hmm. and find out that wasn't the right hill to storm and try to take over the machine gun nest at the top, mm-hmm. the faster you can recalibrate and come back down and go up hill B. So I think speed of implementation on deciding things and giving yourself permission to change course. I think being a person of your word is important. So if you decide something and you've created the gravity to get a bunch of people involved, let's say on a project, and then all of a sudden you're like, this isn't for me. You are responsible to the people that you lead to get involved in something to some degree. So I think there is still, and as you're young, this is a great time to be experimenting on little things, right? But ultimately, when you come to the point of making a decision, I think that the faster you make a decision, I've talked about this before on a podcast. Sometimes I don't know the right decision until I've made one. As soon as I make it, I'm like, that's not the right decision. I got to go the other direction. But I didn't know that until I got to decisive action. And that decisive action, that inner authority of decisive action of your introverted feeling is so key, because we wait for some other authority to tell our introverted feeling it's okay to do that. And just that, even if it's the wrong choice, just getting to the place of making the choice, you're going to get better and better and better at this in your life. And we get so nervous about making those choices because we don't want to get committed to something long term. We don't want to get stuck with something as ENFPs. And we also worry, like, am I allowed to, if I'm the final authority on this, that means we're all the final authority on everything. Like, everybody's the final authority in all their lives. That means there's nothing outside of us. That means we're all just making decisions the best way we can, which is a good thing, I think, for us to realize. But that's unnerving, especially if you're tied into a world. Let's say you're tied in society and you're looking for your cues outside of yourself. That can be very unnerving to realize you're your own authority. So I think that's the lesson here, is getting to that authority, the authority structure of your own integrated person. Like, you are a complete, whole, integral person, and whatever you choose for yourself is the right choice because you chose it. Now, it may not be the choice society would tell you is right, because they might very much disagree with you, but you have to base it on what resonates on the core of your being and your introverted feeling. Did that answer your question?
Yeah. So,
or that only make more confusion? No. I've got like 4 things. Actually, 3. I've got 3 things tagged, and the 3 things that I have tagged. Actually 4. No, I do have 4. The first one is rapid prototyping. Yeah. So in order to know what's right for you, do a lot of rapid prototyping, which is implement quick, get a prototype, figure it out, test, iterate, get into action. The second one is
you didn't say this, but I think this is what's come up for me when I think about a lot of ENFPs, when they're experiencing that phenomenon of knowing what they should have done after they made a decision, is let people know as early as possible that you've changed course.
Yeah.
Because if you make a decision and you say something to somebody and you realize that was the wrong choice, but you don't want to go back on that, right? Then, and now you're in it. And now like what could have been like a, you know what, I said yes to this commitment. Everybody, I think almost every single form of covenant, commitment, every sort of signed documentation gives people a time period, like a cooling off period. Like you can even annul a marriage within a week, right? Like almost every single form of commitment gives people a time period to change their mind if it wasn't right. And that's because it's much easier to annul a marriage after like 2 days after you married than it is to divorce 10 years into it. So
control Z is what you're saying.
Control, like
there's a control Z
as fast
in your life.
As soon as you know it was the wrong decision, that you are like you should be obligated to your own sense of integrity and to the commitments to other people to let them know as fast as possible. So I think that would probably also be a leverage point. The third thing that came up for me is in order for that, what you're talking about to work though, is you have to have an underpinning of a solid character that is not self-indulgent.
Yeah.
Because one of the biggest challenges that people who have introverted feeling have is knowing the difference between what feels right to them and simply what feels good to them, or what feels like the wrong decision versus what feels bad, like they just don't want to do it. So in order for what you're talking about to work, you have to have an underpinning of character, of the kind of person who has the discipline to keep going with something even when you're not like really feeling it anymore. There's a difference between not feeling it, right? Like, oh, I just don't want to do that. And then taking off and disappearing. I mean, I think that's why ENFPs get a bad rap of being like flighty and you can't pin them down, and that you can't rely on them. They're unreliable, is because there is a percentage of ENFPs that haven't matured and seasoned and built the character to stick around even when it's not feeling like they're not feeling it anymore. Versus this is not the right decision for me. Like almost on a core identity level, this is wrong. And so you also have to have built the kind of character that knows the difference between those two things. And sometimes the only way to build that character is to say yes to things that weren't like don't feel good anymore.
Yeah.
And you just stick with it to the end. So a couple false starts, a couple of times of like throwing your hat in the ring when that was not the right ring to throw your hat in, but going all the way to completion is actually good muscle building for ENFPs. Would you
I
say
would
that's
totally
accurate?
agree. And asking the question, to what end? Like ultimately to what end? So this is not exactly in like finding purpose in life, but this is an example of something. So I think a lot of two things. ENFPs, when you do try something, there's like a moment when it gets really, really hard and then, or uninteresting, and often we'll detach and go somewhere else. I would recommend you push through that experience. Like get to the other side, and often there's magic and gold on the other side of that pushing through. Like it's a little tough or uninteresting. When you're bored or it's too hard, stick with it just a little bit longer. Now that doesn't mean stick with something for years that's not a good fit, but stick with it a little longer, because the reference experience and what you learn from that is super important. But more importantly, don't get into those situations in the first place. So really understanding, again, your introverted feeling, what your core values are and why you're doing what you're doing and who you are and what that means about you. Like think through that, and that will help you make better choices. This is an example, not for purpose or passion, but like I have reevaluated my relationship with my extended family recently. As I look in my introverted feeling, I realized that why do I make so much effort to make sure I'm at extended family events when I don't end up talking very deeply with anybody? I don't connect very deeply with anybody. I don't have anything in common with anybody. I'm there just because they're family. Now, this isn't my immediate family or smaller group of family. This is my extended, like, third cousins, second cousins. There used to be these cousin parties that my cousins would host. I was like, I'd make sure I was there every time. I was really important. And I stopped and evaluated. I said, why am I killing myself? What about my core values makes this important to me? And I couldn't really come up with anything. I couldn't figure out why this was so important. And I started to ask myself, to what end? To why am I doing this? And it was like just habit. It was just something that I had done. It was important to the people in my life that had programmed me that this was important. And I don't have anything against these people. Every time I'm around like a family reunion, I'm very friendly and kind to my extended family. But it wasn't really much value in my life, and I wasn't adding much value to their lives. It was an exercise in futility and a lot of effort to get there and be a part of those experiences for no real connection or benefit or anything like that. So my introverted feeling gave me the ability to make a better decision about my time and spending my time there. And I think this is what happens for ENFPs. We start to develop, oh, I can go hang out with that group of people I used to hang out with, but why am I even doing this? Oh, maybe there's an opportunity or something that might come out of it. Well, is that really what's going to happen? Is that really what you're hoping for? You're just hoping and praying? Start making decisions from your introverted feeling, what's core and resonant to you. What is your mission in this life? What's your purpose? What is your core value? What do you care about? This is how you can start to guide the decisions you make. And I think that the things you try then will be higher quality things you try. It won't be all over the place. You're going to stick with them. You're going to choose fewer of them, first of all. You don't have to be throwing random things out there all the time. Choose fewer of them, stick with them a little bit longer than you normally would. And those are going to be reference experiences you're going to lay on the table of your life and make a decision about what you're going to do next, what the purpose or passion or mission is going to emerge from that based on the decision you make for it. And it might be the wrong decision, but that's cool. Then you can calibrate and go again. But that decision making is the thing you're trying to build. That's the skill you're trying to build in your introverted feeling, is decisions about what you'll do.
Yeah, I think for EFPs, a leverage point is recognizing that you have permission to go off script of the values of the people in your life that programmed you. Like you're allowed to reclaim that permission. So if you go, like, let's pretend you went and hung out with extended family, you would know you were doing it because you wanted to do it, because that was something that you valued doing that day. It wasn't simply that you were trying to obey or you felt an obligation to somebody else's script that was influential to you. Like this one was authentic to you. And I think building that muscle for EFPs, both ESFPs and ENFPs, I really think that for our judging function polarities, both introverted thinking, extroverted feeling that TPs and FJs use, and introverted feeling, extrovert thinking, what FPs and TJs use, I think it's like sorting out a concept of obligation versus like what's true to us.
Yeah.
It's like trying to figure out that balance. And we do it in slightly different ways. But I think with like introverted feeling, extroverted thinking, it's this concept like I feel obligated to the systems that have been created outside of me, but what's true to who I am? And what level of personal permission do I have to disrupt those systems that have been set up, right? Like just because I don't really value them. Like a system of like, you know, like the system of extended family. Maybe there's a system of like family reunions that are set up every year, and that's the system. And it's like, well, is that something that I want to go towards? And if you do show up, then that was honest for you.
Yeah.
So I think, I think that reclaiming the permission to give your, like, to be empowered to make decisions that are right for you and not just default to a sense of obligation to a system that's already been set up. I think that that's a major leverage point for FI.
And on the other side, stop giving yourself so many passes.
Yeah.
Like I was just the other day on the mind wiring video for ENFPs on our channel. So it's a video I did like 3 or 4 years ago. It's an audio script I read. It's got a slide. It talks about the CAR model, the ENFP personality type, and it goes into great detail. It's like, I don't know, I want to guess like between 10 and 20 minutes long at the most. At the most. And ENFP after ENFP after ENFP under there is like, one of the ENFPs couldn't make it all the way through this, got distracted and had to like go and do something else and surf other stuff. I'm like, really? You can't focus for 20 minutes? Like you're never going to be successful in anything in life if you can't even get 20 minutes of focus down to learn something. Like we have, and it's like, well, I'm an ENFP. What do you expect? No.
True.
We expect more of ourselves, guys. Like if you're an ENFP, you got to show up. You got to be present to the moment to learn what you got to learn, or pay attention, be in it, be with it. Don't give yourself a pass. That's your type, and that lets you off the hook. Yeah. Work harder, like put the effort in and focus on something. And it doesn't have to be the video that I created. That's not what I'm trying to say. That's just where I saw it. Whatever you're engaged in, be engaged in it. Be here now, be present to it. Like choose to do it, choose it, make a decision, and then be present to it. And you can always change that decision, but don't just abandon it. Like purposely choose something else then. It's the abandonment or the lack of connection and just this flightiness. Like we've got to hold ourselves, ENFPs, unite. We've got to hold ourselves to a higher standard of awareness and attention. Otherwise, we're never going to be able to realize our full potential. So this is my message to you, my love letter to my fellow ENFPs of paying attention, making decisions, and working on that introverted feeling that I was inspired to talk about from our last caller, who's an ENFP. Not because she struggled with any of that stuff, it just reminded me of it.
Well, and I think I know that you wrapped it up. That was beautiful.
No, it's fine. You can say more.
But to piggyback off of that, I think this is particularly an issue for EPs, but I think it's across the board. As humans, we're losing our ability to make peace with boredom. We have started to see boredom as a dirty word.
Yeah.
Like, I'm bored. I'm noticing kids say I'm bored, and they think that the world around them should organize to solve this problem for them.
I said it too when I was a kid, though.
Oh, of course. Well, I mean, all kids say I'm bored, but there's an like for me, the answer was, well, go find something to entertain yourself with then. Like, it's your responsibility to deal with boredom. And in the world I think that we've created, there are so many distractions and such a, like, it's instantaneous to get into passive entertainment.
Yeah.
Like, I have a phone I carry with me at all times that has literally every piece of information that the world has ever had, you know, that's been
Video,
time
audio,
bound.
photo,
Right.
yeah, everything.
And so, like, I don't have to be bored. I just go, oh, I'm bored for 1 second. And then I can look down at my phone and be passively entertained and engage with people digitally all over. I think the inability to make space for boredom, I think, is going to actually possibly fuck us over as a species. I think it might be the downfall of civilization, our inability to be bored.
Will be a divide.
Yeah.
Just like, you know, there's a digital divide people talk about, where people that have access to the internet are going to have a radically different world and skill set and access than people that don't have access to the internet. So rural areas right now, there's a big push to get internet outside of cities, because cities and rural areas are distancing themselves, or divide. I think the same thing is going to be with mindfulness. People that are able to sit and be present, and people that have to be entertained, there's going to be a divide, and you're going to actually have a different type of human. There's a book called The Shallows, which talks about people's brains, like children's brains are actually wiring differently. The folds in the brain, like the little gray matter folds, are shallower than they used to be. So the thinking is less. And that's actually happening on a physical level in our brains. So you're going to have two types of humans, one that have been mindful and ones that haven't. And you're going to see a very different experience for those two humans and how their brains are wired, or multiple levels of humans. So this is something I think all of us struggle with.
Yeah.
But in particular, the modern world is not good for us ENPs. Like it's too much variety and too much stuff happening all the time, too many shiny objects everywhere. Our strength, our leverage point is what we're going to say no to, not what we're going to say yes to. So these are some things for you, ENFPs watching. Take it to heart.
All the EPs.
Leave a comment. Let us know what you're thinking.
All the EPs, though. It's not ENPs. It's all the EPs that we all really struggle with this concept of giving ourselves an ability to move through boredom. And I think it is definitely a leverage point.
All right.
Okay, so we do have that question. I have it pulled up right now. Do you want me to read it?
Cool. Okay. This is probably the last time we're ever going to read a question live on the air, because the point is to get people to call in.
And if we start
training
doing this,
you, we start allowing this, then all we'll get is written in INJs writing in by the droves. We get books and books and books, reams and reams of paper sent to us with INJ questions and comments.
Well, and we do want to train you so that we can hear your voice.
If you'd like to call, we probably have room for maybe 1 or 2 more callers today on today's show. The number's in the description or in the comment field, so feel free to call that number. It's a US-based number. You can call on Skype or just a regular landline phone. You'll go into a hold queue. Cheris can unmute you, ask for your name and topic, put you back on hold, and then we can take you live on the air. I just realized I wrote on my hand, call mom, because I told my mom I'd call her 2 days ago and I forgot. And so I thought of it in the middle of the show, so I wrote call mom, and then I just held my hand up and saw it on camera.
The hand
I write myself reminder notes all the time on my hands.
The hand is the original sticky note.
I probably have like ink poisoning on this left hand.
All right. So here's a question from Lynn. We don't know where Lynn is because we can't ask you where you're at, Lynn, but we're going to take it. All right. Oh, wait. She wrote it in anyway. She says, hi from Oklahoma.
Hi, Lynn.
It's got to be an NJ because she anticipated what it was that we wanted to hear. Okay. Could you talk about being on the border of different types and specifically how circumstances like health or depression can affect how our personality looks on the outside? I'm an ENFJ, but an extreme E. I have rheumatoid arthritis and lupus, which saps my energy, so I live more like an INFJ. Since I've had them for most of my life, more INFJ qualities have developed, and I'm not as strong in the ENFJ qualities that were evident when I was younger.
You know, as a general comment before we get into specifics, this is something that I've noticed. People that are of a certain type that grow up in contexts that stretch them or push them outside of that type, or what you identify as that type. For example, an INFP that grows up in a very extroverted thinking context develops themselves in a very different way than an INFP that grows up in maybe an artistic household, right? They grow up like maybe in a military family. It's gonna be a very different experience for that INFP, because the way their personality is shaped and the things that they're supposed to in their family or their context focus on help develop different aspects of themselves than they would have if they were in a more natural environment for themselves. And often it's been my experience in general that a lot of people get great benefit from that. If you're a certain type and you're put into a context that doesn't just cater to your type, it doesn't cater to how you're wired, it forces you to stretch the other parts of your personality. Notice these are some amazing people that I've met. Like they weren't allowed to indulge or overindulge some of maybe the, not the bad parts of themselves, but the parts that they're indulgent around, right? Their processes, they've had to work on other coping strategies, other mechanisms and grow them. So it sounds really awful, some of the health challenges you're under, like that's not cool. Like that, I was like, ugh, it made me cringe when I heard it. And also there might be great benefit if you're an ENFJ and you're able to grow your introverted intuition co-pilot, that part of you, and you almost look like an INFJ because you were forced into it. There's amazing things that can come from that. So I think it's, in some ways, I just want to honor that when you're put into a context that doesn't cater to your type, that can be very powerful for you. So don't think that's necessarily a bad thing if you're watching and you're relating to what she just said.
Yeah. Cringe with sympathy.
Cringe.
Made
Well,
you cringe with sympathy.
I didn't mean cringe like,
Yeah.
I gotta be careful what I say, yeah.
I know, right?
Cringe like, oh man, I felt bad. Like I felt like, oh, that sounds like a really tough experience. I meant with cringe in that way.
So the question isn't, forgive me, the
Word
question
choice.
isn't super clear. It's more just sort of like a, like what does it mean when you have circumstances in your life that have required of you different elements of your personality to come out, kind of like what Joel is talking about, when the context of your life requires you to not show up as, maybe as authentically as you normally would have. I think that, so I think this is actually one of the best ways, those of us into personality typology, particularly for growth, I think that we have such a leg up on the understanding the concept of systems thinking, because when it comes to who we are as the emergent, right, the emergent of an entire system running, we recognize that our personality type in the Myers-Briggs system, so like our best fit Myers-Briggs type, is one node in the system. But then when we start adding other layers to it, like my Enneagram type, I think we try to shoehorn them in and make them the same node, but they're two totally different nodes. But then once we start realizing that there's different nodes, we're like, oh, what are the other nodes in our lives? Another node could be the family we grew up in and the influences we had. Another node is the culture we come from. Another node is our socioeconomic level. Another node is our health and how we have experienced things physically.
A gender role and all the markers outside and internal that get projected and internalized for that.
That's right, like our social programming, and then just the things that are coming up inside of us, and biology and that kind of stuff. So who we are and how we show up is the emergent of a fairly complex system running. And that is one of the reasons why when we first get into type, or a lot of us that first get into type, because we have we've been trained by life and by our schooling and basically by almost everybody in our world to think in one-to-one correlations, like cause, effect, if, then, right? And so we find a type and we read all these descriptors and we're like, well, it kind of sounds like me, but not completely. Not recognizing that the descriptor cannot take into account all of the different influences in your life, all of the other nodes besides the node of that personality type. So if you have health issues, the emergent of who you are is going to show up differently if in your system one of the nodes is health issues versus somebody who maybe doesn't have those health issues. And so that node is much smaller. It's like a lot less influential to any health issues that they might have had or their relationship to health. So that's one big thing. I think what's interesting about understanding type, though, in relationship to health is also recognizing how personality types have a tendency, or the functions that we use have a tendency to relate to health in and of itself. So as an ENFJ, you might have felt like you were required to act more like an INFJ because maybe you didn't have as much opportunity to be out and about and socializing and have more of like a sort of a projected out energy, like extroverts have a tendency to have, because you've had health issues. Maybe you had to be home more often, or you had less social life, or you had to sort of have more a smaller energy around that. But at the same time, you're also going to be experiencing your health issues more with your extroverted sensing, or that sensation 10-year-old, your extroverted sensing tertiary function. So in some ways, maybe you aren't living as much like an INFJ because the amount of real estate that your health issues is taking and sort of jerking you into that 10-year-old tertiary function of extroverted sensing, where you're always having to sort of like manage your health moment to moment and manage how it's making you feel and apply all this like financial and time resource and all that into taking care of your body. That actually pulls you out of introverted intuition unless you have learned ways to specifically employ introverted intuition or perspectives into your health regime. Meaning that, are you looking for outside of the box ways of dealing with your health? Or are you just in it? Are you just feeling it and in your body experience and in the moment to moment of the health and pain? And my suspicion is that if this has been for a while, if this has been your whole life, you probably have had to create a balance between those two things. You probably did get to a point where like, this sucks, I don't want to feel this way anymore. What are some of the alternative ways that I can approach this? And you got more into your introverted intuition to think about things not so much in terms of just like, what does the doctor say? What are the things that I'm supposed to be doing? What is the world around me? Like, you probably got a little bit more imaginative and a little bit more experimental and a little bit more like sort of seeing health in a holistic way and how it all relates to each other and what's the meaning of all of this. Understanding that how we show up physically is like intrinsically linked to how we think and feel, and how we think and feel sometimes traumas get locked in there and then they bleed out into how we're feeling physically. So if we can heal our emotional and psychological trauma, sometimes that positively affects our bodies and vice versa. If we get our health, our physical health in a better position, it helps unlock emotional and psychological trauma. So you probably have done a lot of experimenting with introverted intuition or perspectives. And if you haven't, that is the thing you must be doing as an ENFJ. You need to get into more of sort of a holistic approach. I don't mean like holistic medicine, because I know that that's loaded and a lot of people have their own definitions of what that means. But I mean in more of an introverted intuition, all these things are connected, and how do I understand the implications and interpretations of all of that as they relate to each other. So what's interesting is that you wouldn't have been living as an INFJ, you would have been living as an NFJ with health problems, right? And the challenges of all of that. In some ways, INFJs have an even more difficult time because their health challenges oftentimes live in their extroverted sensing 3 or inferior, which is their blind spot. And sometimes it takes them a really long time, number 1, to even acknowledge they have health issues. Number 2, to know what to do about it. Number 3, to not just give them self-permission to hand themselves over to health challenges, but to actually proactively use introverted intuition to really help solve this, as opposed to like kind of letting themselves, letting themselves escape to a more introverted space, right? And having health issues be the reason why they can't go out of their house as much. So actually, as an ENFJ, I wouldn't say that you've been living more as an INFJ. I would say that you've been living as an ENFJ with health issues. So yeah, I think it can, to the outside world, if they don't know any better and they don't know what they're doing with diagnostic, it could appear to them that you're more introverted simply because they have a stereotype in their head about what an extrovert is supposed to look like and how they're supposed to show up. But I would say, as somebody who understands the differences, and I don't mean me, I mean in the camp of people who recognize that type can come in all these different flavors, I would say you probably are showing up like an ENFJ with health issues. And that's just one of the nodes in the system that makes up you and who you are as the emergent. But yeah, if you haven't already, you employ introverted intuition or perspectives. Employ that in your strategy for addressing your health, and recognize that the mind-body connection is like this, not these two things that talk to each other, but they're sort of intrinsically linked, and the health of one directly relates to the health of the other. But you probably already have that down. So
yeah, thank you very much for the question.
Yeah.
So this is season 1, episode 2. We're going to start landing the plane here and wrapping up for today. We're going to be doing 6 total episodes in season 1, and then we're going to recalibrate and keep tweaking and making this a better show each time we go. But it's so important you're involved with this. Thank you so much for being a part of this. If you're live with us today, we appreciate you showing up and being involved, watching, commenting. I see a lot of comments coming through in the feed, in the live feed, which is great. So there's like almost a back channel of people having conversation, which is really awesome. And then next time on the next show, feel free to call in. There's a live US-based number. We get a lot of people from the South calling in on the last couple episodes here in the United States. I guess Northerners are too busy to call in. I don't know what it is. They just have too fast a pace live. Slow down, Northerners, here in the US. And people from out of the country. If you're overseas, you can call in too. It's a US-based number. You might need to get on like Google Voice or Skype to be able to call in. We'd love to hear from people from all over the world. It doesn't have to be US-centric right now. And right now we're going to get through the first 6 episodes of the first season. And season 2, we might do different times of the day, different access points for you to be able to call in and ask your questions live on the air, because we'd love having you be a part of this show. And other recommendations, things you'd like to see us do. We'd love to hear from you, any comments or feedback you have from the show. Anything else you want to say before we wrap up?
Nope.
I want to recommend, again, I'll do this probably the end of every show, go get a copy of Personality Hacker. It's our book. You can get it at major retailers, online. We recommend you order it through your local bookstore so you can support local bookstores in your community and continue that tradition of local great booksellers locally. But get a copy of Personality Hacker. We made a joke on our podcast about having to have 11 copies. We originally said it was the zombie apocalypse, so that you could use it for hiding things if you needed to inside the book, cut it out, hide objects. You could use it as fire starters. You can also help rebuild society with the 11th copy. So we kind of have a recommendation there. We got to figure out more reasons to get 11 copies just besides the zombie apocalypse going forward. So be thinking about that too. If you want to make a recommendation on why you need 11 copies of Personality Hacker besides the zombie apocalypse, we'd also love to hear from you. I did a lot of talking just then again. Anything else you want to say?
Yeah, it's good. You're good at framing.
Good at closing us out.
Close up shop.
Thanks for being with us today. And we'll talk with you on the next episode of Personality Hacker TV. I'm Joel Markowitz.
I'm Tony Dodge.
Peace out. Talk to you soon.